Welcome to meeting number 3 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights. Pursuant to the motion adopted on Tuesday, February the 8th, the committee is meeting on the review of the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. With regards to speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our best to maintain a consolidated order for speaking for all members, whether they're participating virtually or in person. I think there's one witness still trying to get on, but otherwise I would like to welcome our witnesses, and I will begin. I'm going to be using little cue cards today, so if you're in the last 30 seconds, if you can see it, I'll give you a little warning without interrupting, so hopefully your train of thought doesn't go away. And then when you're out of time, I don't want to be rude, but I will put up the out of time card. So I would like to call Kathy Peters to our first witness. So if you can speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll have the next witnesses speak for 5 minutes each as well, and then subsequently you'll have a round of questions. Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a former inner city high school teacher raising awareness about human sex trafficking and sexual exploitation for the purpose of prostitution, which is modern day slavery. Stats: 13 years is the average age of recruitment, much younger for Indigenous girls. In the Vancouver area, the target age has now dropped to 10 to 12 years old. COVID has made this worse. Traffickers are organized and sophisticated. 90% of the luring, grooming, buying, and selling is online on social media platforms. 54% of the sex trade are Indigenous, 70 to 90% in urban centers. They are severely overrepresented in the sex industry. I told the BC Indigenous chiefs in front of Justice Minister David Lametti, this is the most egregious form of systemic racism in Canada. 82% involved in prostitution had childhood sexual abuse or incest. 72% live with complex PTSD. 95% in prostitution want to leave. It is not a choice or a job. The vast majority of prostituted persons are pimped or trafficked. So organized crime and international crime syndicates are typically involved. Crime follows the money, and traffickers make hundreds of thousands of dollars per victim per year. My goal is to traffic-proof every community in British Columbia and to stop the full decriminalization of prostitution in Canada by supporting the federal law, the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. I've been involved with sexual exploitation prevention for over 40 years and began raising awareness full-time for the last 8 years since PSEPA became federal law. In 2014, I began presenting to politicians, all 3 levels of government, the police, and the public. I explained PSEPA so the police would enforce it, the public would understand it, and be able to report it. So the law has 4 parts. Number 1, it targets the demand by targeting the buyer of sex. The trafficker, facilitator, buyer of sex are criminalized. Number 2, it recognizes seller of sex as a victim, usually female, and is immune from prosecution. Number 3, exit strategies are in place to assist the victim out of the sex trade. 4, there's robust prevention education, so youth, children, and the vulnerable are not pulled into the sex industry. This law focuses on the source of the harm, the buyers of sex and the profiteers. The clear statement from Parliament was that girls and women in Canada are not for sale, that they are full human beings with dignity and human rights. In 8 years, I have made over 500 presentations to over 20,000 people, not including the presentations that can be viewed online. But the turning point was last March, when the Kamloops mass grave was reported. Since then, I have made over 200 presentations to city councils, regional districts, school boards, police boards, schools, frontline service providers, Indigenous groups, including missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls gatherings in British Columbia. I have 3 points. Number 1, PSEPA is not known or enforced in BC. Therefore, BC is the best province in Canada to buy sex. Organized crime and international crime syndicates are typically involved. Number 2, PSEPA has never had a national rollout campaign. Some Canadians have not heard of the law, and the police are not getting the funding or training to enforce the law. Number 3, the sex industry wants to repeal PSEPA to normalize, commercialize, and institutionalize the sex industry in Canada. If this happens, Canada will become a global sex tourism destination and America's brothel. Indigenous women and girls would be first casualties. No Canadian would ever support this. Consistent enforcement and the strengthening of PSEPA combined with a robust educational campaign is needed. Without the enforcement of the law, the sex industry will continue to grow rapidly. The review of PSEPA puts Canada at a tipping point. Repealing or weakening the law will have a catastrophic impact on this beautiful country of Canada. Conclusion, I do not want anyone on this committee to be under any illusion that the sex industry is safe. It can never be made safe. It is a deadly industry. I have presented with the forensics RCMP officer who picked up and identified the body pieces on the Robert Pickton farm. Trish Baptiste is presenting next hour. She's a survivor and was a journalist for 2 years at the Pickton trial. Please read and understand the Robert Pickton case thoroughly. That describes the reality of the sex industry and how it works. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. Next to, I don't know, is Dr. Chivry on yet? No. Okay, we'll go to Jennifer Dunn of the London Abused Women's Centre for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My name is Jennifer Dunn, and I am the Executive Director of the London Abused Women's Centre. And when watching Tuesday's session for this study, it was said that what is needed is less law, less statistics, and more information from the ground, from the most directly impacted. So thank you for having me here today. The London Abused Women's Centre is a feminist organization located in London, Ontario, that supports and advocates for personal, social, and systemic change directed at ending male violence against women and girls. We are non-residential and provide women and girls over the age of 12 who have been abused, assaulted, exploited, and trafficked with immediate access to long-term trauma-informed, woman-centered counseling, advocacy, and support. Over the next few minutes, as I talk to you about our work, I will be referring to our center as LOC, and I will also be using the term sex industry from time to time. The sex industry includes women who have been prostituted, sexually exploited, and trafficked. LOC does not use the term sex work. During LOC's last fiscal year, over 4,600 women and girls who were abused, assaulted, exploited, and trafficked were provided with individual counseling and group support. During the same time, LOC also answered the over 5,000 calls for support. LOC has been providing services to women and girls involved in the sex industry for nearly 25 years. And since 2015, LOC has supported over 2,800 women and girls involved in the sex industry and over 1,800 women and girls who were at risk of becoming involved in the sex industry. This number includes at least 68 girls who reported they were under 18 years of age. Young women and girls between the ages of 12 to 21 are at the highest risk of being sexually exploited, groomed, and lured into the sex industry, often by traffickers who manipulated them into believing they were in a relationship. LOC recognizes prostitution as male violence against women, incompatible with women's human rights, and it is the demand for prostitution that fuels sex trafficking. The Nordic model, equality model, or in Canada's case, the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act, decriminalizes women in the sex industry while criminalizing sex purchasers and traffickers. This same model provides support services and safety planning to those wishing to exit and those who are not able to exit. It also educates community about the impacts of prostitution and sexual exploitation on the lives of future generations. Canada needs this legislation to protect the most vulnerable before the trafficking laws need to come into play. And the best approach to reduce sex trafficking is to continue to decriminalize the women and girls being exploited while criminalizing the sex purchasers and traffickers. Some women and girls come to LOC because they are being abused by their intimate partner. After a few sessions, it is revealed that the woman's intimate partner is also her trafficker. Many sexually exploited women and girls attending Locke identified that they have endured horrific torture and abuse from sex purchasers and traffickers. They report suffering from significant mental health issues and physical trauma from these experiences. They come to Locke looking for support. Some women and girls have become involved in the sex industry independently, but report they quickly end up under the control of someone else. Women have reported that they were lured into the sex industry. Some enter for survival. Women report being suicidal, and some die by suicide. Some women have significant substance use issues because they are introduced to an addictive drug as a way for them to cope or for them to be controlled. Most women report they are forced to have unwanted sex with multiple random men, with some women saying they must meet certain quotas day after day. You may never hear from those who are most vulnerable. They may not even know that the issues directly impacting their lives are being talked about at this very moment in the House of Commons. In 2014, after the change in legislation, there have been fewer homicides of women in the sex industry, fewer women accused in sex trade-related incidences, and more men accused of obtaining sexual services from a minor. Locke and other agencies like ours across Canada see women every single day who have been exploited and lured with the promise or hope for a better life. The truth is, the sex industry is putting women and girls at risk every single day. Normalizing the sex industry by decriminalizing the purchasers and traffickers would set women's rights back decades. The government has a responsibility to make decisions based on the best interests of all. This is not an individual issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll next go to our witness. I think she's on, Dr. Claudine Chevrier. If you can just test the mic for about 10 seconds, say anything, how the weather is.
Yes, hello. Bonjour. Good afternoon. Just want to make sure the mic works.
We got a thumbs up, so your sound is good. I will, you have 5 minutes, and then we'll have questions right after.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy that I was finally able to join. I'm here to share some insights from research that I conducted on sex work in Winnipeg, Manitoba over the last decade. I completed a PhD in community health sciences at the Max Rady College of Medicine at the University of Manitoba in 2020. My dissertation topic was on access to health and social services for cisgender and transgender women and non-binary people selling or trading sex in the city. The methodology I used was ethnography. In order to talk about access to health and social services, I needed to characterize what's happening politically and socially around sex work in Winnipeg. And of course, that's framed in the legal context, which for the entirety of my data collection was the Protections of Communities and Exploited Persons Act. My research indicated that sex workers and people who sell and trade sex have poor access to health and social services, experience a lack of safety, serious stigmatization, and barriers in accessing what they need. This relates to a general climate of indifference and stigma, which is framed by the current legal context. My research points to, among other things, the fact that policies, programs, and laws should focus on approaches that prioritize the safety, health, and well-being of sex workers on their own terms. One of the ways towards achieving that is the decriminalization of all aspects of the sex trade. Before I tell you a little bit more about findings from my research, I want to give you a clearer picture of who it is I talk to. I did formal, semi-structured interviews with 39 sex workers and people selling sex, 12 interviews with stakeholders, and over 4 years of participant observation with sex workers right activists in the city. That's in addition to document analysis, literature review of local, national, international literature. Of the sex workers and people who trade and sell sex that I spoke to, the average age was 36 years old, and the people I spoke to, the range was from 20 to 55 years old. 52% indicated that they were Indigenous, Aboriginal, or Métis, 17% that they were white. I asked everyone where they mostly meet clients. The most common answers were on the streets, in bars, and online in order to meet in person. I'm telling you all of this to give you an idea that I spoke to a very diverse group of people. I want to give you one example from my research that's about the climate of lack of safety for sex workers in Winnipeg under PCEPA. It also happens to be an example of a very important documented dynamic in Winnipeg, which is the aggressive silencing and erasure of sex workers' voices if they do not see their experience as exploitative. This is shown in my dissertation. It's noted in other research as well. I won't talk about it too much here, but I wanted to point it out. So the example is that in 2017, at a town hall meeting, Winnipeg Police Service Chief Danny Smythe answered a question from a local sex workers' right advocacy group, the Sex Workers of Winnipeg Action Coalition, about the safety specifically of sex workers under PCEPA. And he stated that he believes that most of the people in the sex trade are, that's a quote, are being exploited in one way or another. End quote. He then added that he refers to them as, quote, exploited persons, whether they be men, women, or children, end quote. Chief Smythe plainly stated that he does not think that sex workers exist in Winnipeg. I invite you to think about what that means when the chief of police does not think that you exist. Sex workers who were present and who heard it said that it meant to them that they are not to expect recognition or protection from police services. This is especially true for populations that are already over-policed, like Indigenous people and other racialized groups. My research documents the unacceptable experiences of discrimination, stigmatization that most of my participants encountered in health and social services. Not everyone described experiences of discrimination, but everyone was concerned about it and used strategies to avoid it and to keep themselves safe from it. Stigma and the fear of it touched everyone. Feelings that ranged from mistrust to outright anger, and fear of the police were expressed by 12 of the people I talked to unprompted. One person I talked to, I called her C in my dissertation. She was a 49-year-old Indigenous cisgender woman who worked outdoors. After she told me that she would never report a sexual assault to the police, I asked her if she would be willing to share why with me. And she said, because I don't like the police. Because it's when you're in that area, they look at you like you're a nobody. I don't even trust them. They've done things to the workers that not any normal person would. They just tend to degrade the workers on the street. I know that. People I spoke to asked for services to be more compassionate, to use appropriate language, to educate themselves on the varied realities that exist in sex work, to hire more sex workers, and above all, to respect their humanity. And this was the most devastating result.
There,
yes, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Thank you. This was the most devastating result from my research. About 30 out of 49 people told me that they wanted to be treated like human beings. And this is how terribly we are failing sex workers in our communities, in our programs, in our policies, and in our laws.
Thank you. I'm gonna. You'll have some more time during questions to answer and make some of your points.
Thank you.
For the first round of questions, I'll go to Mr. Brock for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Thank you. I'd like to thank all three presenters, Ms. Peters, Ms. Dunn, and Dr. Chevrier, for all the important work that you are doing in this particular area. Your comments and your responses to a number of questions this afternoon will be very helpful in this committee in making recommendations. I'd like to start off by questioning Ms. Peters. Ms. Peters, I'm a former Crown attorney, and in that role, I have specialized in prosecuting special victims of crime, particularly human trafficking victims and child victims. And I also spent a great deal of time dealing with Indigenous offenders and Indigenous victims. I'm very much concerned about, although that Indigenous women and children make up such a small percentage of the population in Brantford, they are heavily disproportionately represented as victims of human trafficking. My riding in Brantford Brant includes the largest Indian reservation in Canada, known as the Six Nations of the Grand River. I don't know if you're familiar with that particular reservation, but I'd like to ask you specifically, what are your thoughts as to what is happening in that particular jurisdiction and why generally there is such a high percentage of Indigenous women and children who find themselves victimized?
Well, thank you for that. Again, my focus really is British Columbia. And of course, we have a huge number of Indigenous in BC. And I've had the opportunity and honor to present to a lot, well, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls gatherings specifically. And the women and girls give me the information. I've also done a lot of extra presentations to Indigenous youth workers, the Vancouver Native College, House of the Moon. So lots of opportunities. They're the ones that tell me what is going on. So it is true what the doctor was just saying, that typically the problem is mistrust of police. They certainly will not report. That is a big problem. But also with the Indigenous, these communities live with complex PTSD. I didn't know much about complex PTSD. That's another level, but that is generational trauma. That is what the Indigenous women and girls live with. It's generation to generation to generation. Their communities are not necessarily the healthiest or safest places either. They have certainly told me that. So there is childhood sexual abuse, and there is incest that often takes place. They don't feel safe or free to talk about it or report it. So it's this ongoing cycle that tends to go on from generation to generation. The wonderful news is the Indigenous women and girls want a voice. They're learning that they have a voice. I encourage them to express their voice. So yeah, they're severely overrepresented. It's not just in your area, it's right across the country. And certainly in BC, what is happening now, the sex industry is targeting Indigenous women and girls very specifically. I've had young Indigenous girls tell me that it happens online and these traffickers will simply offer free drugs and alcohol. That's all it takes. It doesn't take much. So this is what we have to deal with. And I think education is really key. That is what we are missing. Hello. And I just want to add that PSEPA deals with the root cause, the demand. We've got to deal with the buyers. We've got to deal with the men and boys that are exploiting and buying. We've got to reach men and boys. And the one word I say to men and boys is there's a sacred part of the woman you have no right to. And I did say this to all the Indigenous chiefs in BC. And that's where it's at. We've got to deal with root causes, and that is what this law does.
Okay. I like to focus with the time I have remaining with respect to the criminal penalties under Bill C-36. As you know, Bill C-36 criminalized certain type of behaviors which resulted in mandatory minimums dealing with adults of anywhere from 4 to 5 years, depending on the circumstances. In your opinion, do you feel that the changes in the legislation under the criminal code has had a required deterrent impact as a result of that legislation change?
Okay, that's an excellent question. It has a potential to if the law was actually enforced. And the problem in BC is it's not enforced. We have a provincial government that they don't go after the sex workers or the prostituted people that are in the sex industry. They don't go after them. They get that piece, but they're not going after the root cause. Minimum sentences, at least I'd like to see them increased. I mean, the one case that I was involved in that I had to speak to was R versus Alcorn. Did you all watch that in Manitoba with the young underage Indigenous girl that was sexually assaulted, exploited, filmed, committed suicide? The judges in that case quadrupled the sentence of the predator, which was absolutely brilliant. So personally, it can be a deterrent if it's used. Thank you.
Okay. A number of the witnesses that we've heard from so far, and a number of witnesses we're about to hear, are going to be advocating for a decriminalization of all prostitution laws as a means to safeguard our women and children. If that is not going to be the reality in the foreseeable future, can you offer any suggestions as to proposed amendments to the law to make the situation safer for women and children?
Quick answer, Ms. Peters, you got 10 seconds.
Okay, I'm not a lawyer, but I can get, my brief has suggestions, and I've submitted that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. Now over to Mr. Nakvi for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I want to thank the three panelists for their intervention. Dr. Chevrier, I wanted to make sure that if you've got a couple of last important points to make, that I'm able to give you maybe a minute or two quickly to you to finish your point.
Thank you. That's very kind. Um, yes, thank you. I was in a bit of a rush when I got here. I guess one thing that I wanted to say was just that what my research shows is that there's a climate of stigmatization in Winnipeg. There's also a history of hostility and disregard of sex workers' perspectives in a way that falsely oppose sex workers' rights to the necessary protection of the victims of sexual exploitation and human trafficking. And erasure and silencing of sex workers does not help sex workers. It does not keep them safe. It does not keep the victims of sexual exploitation safe. Criminalization of sex work does not protect sex workers or victims of exploitation. And it is possible to support sex workers and to fight against trafficking and exploitation. It is possible to do all of this together at the same time. And I think that the focus needs to be on safety. It needs to be based on evidence. There's mountains of evidence in public health that point towards decriminalization of sex work, both nationally as well as internationally. And there's also mountains of evidence that come from sex workers locally that I would urge everyone to look at.
Thank you. So let me ask you, based on your research, has the law been effective?
If you're asking me if the law has made things safer for sex workers, it has not. There's research that has been done on this in public health. For example, there's a research from 2019 with 299 participants that found that 26.4% of its respondents indicated negative changes to their working conditions since the enactment of PCEPA. So that means that it not only didn't stay the same, it got worse. There's also research from Vancouver, actually, in spite of local policy guidelines, particularly not targeting people, that shows that police presence leads to an increase in rushed client negotiations for sex workers. In this case, the research was with sex workers who use drugs. It was also associated with client-perpetrated violence and other markers of vulnerability. So the presence of the police is still increasing violence for sex workers. There's another study from 2021 with 200 sex workers in 5 cities in Canada, where 31% reported not being able to call 911 if they or another sex worker were in a safety emergency due to fear of police detection of themselves or their colleagues or their management. So I could go on, but I don't want to drown everyone in statistics. But I just want to say that clearly, no, it is not working. It is not working for sex workers. It is not making their life safer, and it is not working for victims of sexual exploitation. It is not keeping them safer.
So based on your research and the other studies that you were just citing, where are the gaps? Our purpose here is to review the legislation and develop some recommendations. This is your opportunity to highlight the gaps for us. And what would you suggest us as parliamentarians to change in this legislation?
I think that this legislation is based on the idea of ending demand, as was mentioned, and it still criminalizes parts of the sex trade, right? It still criminalizes clients and sex workers in many ways. And I think that as long as there's criminalization of the sex trade, we're going to see poor health outcomes and social outcomes. That is what the literature points at internationally as well as locally. So I think that an approach that would be centered on evidence and that would be done in consultation, in meaningful consultation with stakeholders, which are sex workers who are currently working, I think that that would be something that would be very useful. I think another way in which the of sex workers in Canada, it contravenes to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that's something that should be looked at. The And just to summarize, I would say that the criminalization, such as PCPA, pushes sex workers underground, and it pushes them to report less to police, and it creates barriers in them having access to services that they need, be that social services or health services. In my research, I spoke to many people who were endlessly debating and creating complex strategies to see if they would disclose that they were sex worker to their healthcare providers or to their social worker, because they fear the implication that that will have on their lives, on their colleagues' life, on their families' lives. And this is pushed by criminalization, by the fact that the sex trade is still criminalized.
Thank you. Ms. Dunn, can I ask you the same question around effectiveness?
Unfortunately, Mr. Naqvi, you're out of time.
Oh, am I? Okay, I'll come back again.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Over to Madame Michaud.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for having been here. Thank you for your evidence. It's highly appreciated. I'll continue with you, Madame Chevrier. Actually, Bill C-36 was put in place in the context of the Bedford decision, saying that some provisions of the criminal code were dangerous for prostitution. And there were three major objectives which this law wanted to cover: to protect people who are prostituting themselves, who are considered as victims of sexual exploitation, also protect communities against harms created by prostitution, and decreasing the demand for sexual services. In the light of your evidence, we understand that that did not help protect people practicing prostitution. It put them in greater danger, actually. I'd like to hear you speak more about that, and also about the third point, which is to decrease the demand for sexual services. Do you think that goal was achieved? And if yes, where does this objective come from, in your opinion? Thank you very much. I will answer in French, if that's all right. Yes, so thank you very much. You did see that the PCEPA was supposed to respond to the Bedford decision. Unfortunately, in my opinion, although I'm not a legal specialist, the intention of the Bedford decision was not really followed, because we're continuing to criminalize sex workers, the people who sell sexual services. And from what I understood about the intention of the law, what was said by Senator Don Plett when we were talking about Bill C-36, the intention, inaudible, was to make the situation so difficult for people who are working that they would move to something else. But that's not what happened. What happened is that the situation was made very difficult for sex workers, and new obstacles were created to them having access to what they needed, to the services that they needed. In terms of decreasing the demand, this is an idea that's very strongly held in people against sex work, prohibitionists. There is no data that shows that this works, that it's ever worked. For example, in Sweden, where a similar legal framework was adopted in 1999, I believe, it did not work. The only thing we heard is that the demand may have slightly decreased in the beginning, but that did not continue. What we know is that violence and harassment increased for sex workers, who will be hiding both from social services and from the police. So from the services of law and order. So I don't think it's possible. And I think it goes against the idea that I'm defending, and I think that the data really are pointing to this, which is that we should concentrate on the safety of people who work in the sex trade, regardless of how the position that people take in terms of the sex trade, this trade will continue, and the citizens who work in this industry have the right to safety. They have the same right as other citizens. So I understand that to better ensure the safety of sex workers, that it should probably be decriminalized. But I'm wondering about this bill that we're studying now. Do you disagree with all provisions? The provisions making greater penalties or sentences for people who are in human trafficking. So I work on the sex trade and not on human trafficking. That being said, from what I understand about those sentences, I don't think that this has really helped people who are victims of human trafficking. I also wanted to say that a law that imperils sex workers will not help victims of sexual exploitations and victims of human trafficking, because it just puts everyone in greater danger. So I think we need to think about it and maybe base ourselves on the excellent Canadian studies carried out on the subject to arrive at solutions which could help. We must help victims of sexual exploitation and of human trafficking without putting in danger sex workers, the other people who are there who have the right to live. Thank you. I think I won't have enough time to ask you to answer my next question, but your research is mainly concentrated in Winnipeg, but can you talk about the situation in Quebec? My doctorate, I studied in Winnipeg. I can talk about the situation in Quebec, but not with the same degree of authority. Okay, thank you.
To Mr. Garrison for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to extend particular thanks to Dr. Chevrier for being with the committee this morning, because I think it helps us focus on the purpose of this study, which is the impact of the law on those involved in sex work, and not on moral judgments or ideological judgments of those who are involved. So I'd like to ask you a couple specific questions based on your on-the-ground research. How does the current law in criminalizing those who purchase sex make the transactions with their clients more dangerous?
Thank you. Their current laws, because they criminalize clients, it makes it more difficult for sex workers to negotiate the interaction that consensual interaction that we'll have with their clients, and that can mean that it makes it more difficult to negotiate safer sex measures such as condom use. So that can make it more difficult. It also makes it more difficult for them to communicate with their clients generally and use various safety measures that sex workers typically use. So for example, some indoor workers might be asking clients to provide some identification or some sort of proof of who they are. Maybe they send it to someone that they work with. All of that would be very difficult under the current laws because it all provides documentation. The client might be very reluctant to provide identification in order to do something that is criminalized under these laws, which of course makes it more difficult for sex workers to ensure their safety. It also makes it difficult for sex workers to be able to report to the police, or in general, as you know, the two examples I gave from my research, it makes it difficult for sex workers to be able to trust the police because the police are charged with enacting a law that is steeped in is based on a legal framework that seeks to eradicate the work that they do. So that all of that makes it very difficult for them to trust the police, especially when situations occur like the one with Chief Smythe in Winnipeg, denying that sex workers exist in his opinion. Dr.
Chevrier, can I ask you about another specific aspect? That's the provisions in the current law that forbid those who work on the streets from being near certain public institutions. Can you talk about the impact of those provisions on safety of those who are working on the streets?
Thank you. Yes, so for people who work outdoors, those specifications, if you think about it, it says that it is difficult, there's extra penalty, I think, also even for people who are, as you mentioned, working or communicating around prostitution close to daycares and schools and churches, which if you think about it is most places in a city. I know in Winnipeg, I can't be really far from from one of those things at any point. So that makes it very difficult for sex workers to, it makes them very nervous to work in certain areas. So that pushes them to go to certain areas that might be more remote, where there might not be cell service, where there might not be passerbys, or it might be even more difficult to work in teams or with other people, which of course all of that increases the chances of being the victims of violence, especially since sex workers can be targeted by people for violence.
In the time remaining, certainly the other two witnesses told us their goal, which is eradicating sex work. Can you tell us what you would see as the best outcome from a study like this? I know many people involved in sex work have been skeptical of this review. So can you tell us what you think might be the best outcome of this review?
Thank you. I think, in my opinion, the best outcome of this review would be to take a hard look at the evidence that has been produced by researchers, and the feedback that has been received from sex workers. And I do hope that you will hear from many more sex workers who are currently working, who are the main stakeholders in this issue, and that you would realize that this law is not doing what I believe people want it to be doing. It is not keeping people safer. It is not making life safer for sex workers and for victims of sexual exploitation and human trafficking. And this law is, in my opinion, supposed to focus on sex work and on safety of sex workers. So I would hope that people would conclude that this is not the way to go. And again, I would, invite everyone to look at the literature in public health internationally that focuses on decriminalization. There's Amnesty International recently came out for decriminalization. I also want to point you toward a position statement from the Canadian Public Health Agency which came out after PCEPA, that speaks of the importance of decriminalization for better health outcome and social outcomes for sex workers in Canada. And I imagine I have to stop talking right away, but I'll just say that the evidence is clear in public health that for health outcomes, for social outcomes, decriminalization is the way to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Our next witness is, next round is for Mr. Moore. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Moore.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And, it's become clear on this panel that we could easily have 3 hours with this panel because so much great information being provided and so much expertise and real life experience. I think we have to be very clear as well. Bill C-36, which was a response to the Bedford decision, it makes it very clear that selling your own sexual services is protected from criminal liability. So it's already decriminalized. What people who are calling for full decriminalization now are saying that obtaining sexual services for consideration, those that buy, sell, and exploit what Kathy Peters, you identified, and other witnesses have, vast majority being women, being exploited, that should somehow be legal, that we should decriminalize the purchase and sale of Canadians, mostly women. And many people, of course, reject that outright. Now, you made a number of statements that I want to hone in on kind of quickly, but one, calling Canada's potential to become America's brothel. And you drew on your experience in BC, where you're saying that this legislation that was passed in 2014 is not being enforced, and you're seeing evidence of how different provinces are treating it. Could you explore that a little further in how the failure to enforce this law leads to more victimization?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I'm an inner city high school teacher. I didn't choose to sign up for this. When PSEPA became law, I just started thinking I'd start speaking to law enforcement and to the public and to see if they knew about the law and they were going to enforce it. They never heard of the law. And I'm 8 years into this, presenting to every single politician in British Columbia knows me. And I cannot believe it. They don't know the law. Even the provincial bureaucrats at our provincial government in public safety don't really understand the law. So, and I'm just, the phone is ringing off the hook is all I can say. I work on this full time, almost 7 days a week. I do want to point out a book. And if you want research that's Canadian and it's national, it's The Sex Industry Slavery, Protecting Canada's Youth. This is the PhD thesis by Dr. Robert Christmas, and I have been interviewed with him on radio and TV. He's a Winnipeg police officer. He gets what this looks like. And the thing is, Ontario, literally, because they understand about this, they have a human trafficking coordinator, their police are trained, they're literally 30 years ahead of BC. Manitoba has somebody called Joy Smith. I don't know if you all know the name Joy Smith, but she has introduced our 3 human trafficking laws. I have volunteered for her. Manitoba, anybody in Manitoba gets this issue. Alberta even gets it. You've got Paul Brandt there. You've got Not in My City programs. But in BC, what we have now, and Vancouver has become a global sex tourism destination, along with Tofino, along with Whistler. And I just presented I present to city councils all over British Columbia just this last week to a little tiny community called Telqua on the Highway of Tears. I mean, they are losing their girls. Indigenous women tell me they're losing their girls. It's just ongoing. I work very closely with law enforcement. I work closely with the RCMP headquarters, Vancouver Police Department, Victoria Police Department. What's happening in Vancouver and Victoria is crime is just spiking in both cities. There's sort of an attitude of be scared of the police, this narrative of don't trust the police, defund the police. That has made this all way, way, way worse. And the Ottawa police officer on Tuesday talked about there's a real need for the school liaison officers in the schools. Well, in Vancouver and New Westminster and Victoria, they've been taken out. So organized crime moves in. This is about
organized crime. I want to jump on and thank you for that response. We don't have a ton of time, so we have to ask as many questions as we can in this short amount of time, but thank you for that response. And Jennifer Dunn, I want to give you a chance to speak as well about the work at Locke, but one of the things that you said is Canada needs this legislation, and this is, you used the word incompatible, that we need to continue to criminalize the purchase and sale of human beings, mostly women, that we shouldn't, but by taking that step to fully decriminalize, what we're saying is you can buy people in Canada and mostly women. Do you want to expand on that from your experience at the London Abused Women's Centre?
A quick answer, Ms. Dunn.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yes. So this is an issue that impacts all of society, and this is not what we want for girls in our community. We need to remember that men do not deserve paid access to female bodies. The human body is not a commodity to be bought and sold. And women report to us every single day when they come through our doors that this is not what they want for themselves. And we need to recognize the impact on our community in that regard, and the women and girls that are the most vulnerable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. And now to Ms. Dillon. Ms. Dillon, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to direct my questions to Mrs. Chevrier. First of all, I'd like to ask you, please, if you could submit some of the literature and statistics you've mentioned throughout your testimony to the committee. We would really appreciate that. So my first question is, you spoke extensively about sex workers, victims not being able to trust the police, that they're even terrified of them. It's not the first time we've heard this. Most often, those who do the work you do, the service you do to help people bring this to us during their testimony. Can you please tell us what can be done to encourage law enforcement officers to have compassion towards sex workers and also often victims, to recognize that? And can you tell us what is wrong with the whole culture? Why this culture of not treating them like human beings? And if you can give some concrete solutions to us, we'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great question. I think there's big questions. I will do my best to tell you what I can. Maybe I won't go into the research. First of all, I will send all of the research. I will submit a brief as well as all the literature I mentioned, which is, it's very diverse. I guess the issue with the police and people not trusting the police is very complex. I do think that the recent movements like Black Lives Matters and initiatives that seek to defund or be critical of the police have kind of broadened the understanding that has been the reality of a lot of marginalized populations in the last forever. But I think it's it's made it clearer for the general population, and I'm thankful for that. I guess some things that would be helpful in general is a better understanding of the realities. And this is something that was actually said to me by the people I interviewed. At the end of my interviews, I would ask, what would you like to say to service providers? If I gave you a mic, what would you say? They had all sorts of things to say. First of all, that they wanted to be treated like human beings, which was devastating to hear interview after interview after interview. But they also had concrete suggestions, such as having sex worker-led trainings for police officers and different service providers, programs to help police officers understand the varied realities that are included in the word sex work, on understanding of the difference between sex work, sexual exploitation, and human trafficking, which are not synonyms and should not be used as such. They also asked for compassion training, which I don't know. I'm not quite sure how one does that to an adult, but I think it's just significant of how terrible things can be. So I think those would be issues those are concrete things that come from my research. More generally, I think that in a context where sex work might be decriminalized, it might make it easier for sex workers to be able to reach out when they have situations of violence in their lives that relate to sex work or not, to reach out to police officers or to whatever service they require without fearing that they might be criminalized, or that they might be for sex work or something else, or that they might be pressured into giving their list of clients, which, some like their list of clients might be good clients. That's why they keep them. So I think that in a context that it's not criminalized, it would make it easier for sex workers to be able to call the police. It would also make it easier for clients who might see something that seems dangerous to intervene or to call the police. That would never happen in the context. I just quickly want to give the example of New Zealand, where sex work has been decriminalized since 2003. And there was a few years ago, there was the story of a massage parlor worker who was able to make a complaint against her boss who was sexually harassing her, and won that complaint and was compensated as any other worker would. And that is something that is unthinkable in Canada right now, that a sex worker might be able to do something like that. So I just wanted to end here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Dillon. I next go to Madam Michaud for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Cette fois-ci, je vais m'adresser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now I would like to ask my questions of Ms. Dunn of the London Abused Women's Centre. And I wanted to talk about the impact of the pandemic on workers in the industry. In article in the National Post, it said that there's an increase of clientele. Your centre worked for 9,800 girls, including 800 women and girls victims of sexual exploitation. Can you talk about the impact on your clientele of the pandemic, and more particularly women and girls victim of sexual exploitation?
Serious effect on all Canadians, specific to women and girls. It has been very difficult because when we notice periods of what I'll call a lockdown, or where women and girls are told to kind of minimize their traffic and where they're going, and schools are not in, and that kind of thing, it makes it very difficult for women to access service. This is because for multiple reasons. So women might be trapped in their homes with their abusers or traffickers, and they do not have an opportunity to reach out for support. And so what our agency really focuses on is being able to provide immediate access to support and being available when a woman walks through our door or when a woman makes a call, so that we can provide her support as quickly and effectively as possible. A lot of the work that we do is around safety planning. And so if a woman comes to our door who has been trafficked or exploited or is involved in the sex industry, we really and truly meet her where she is at and figure out what works best for her in the moment. So like I said, the pandemic itself has had a huge impact on the lives of all women and girls, and women who have been sexually exploited and trafficked are truly no different, and they are the most at risk. Women face violence and physical health issues, and thank you.
Sorry. Next 2.5 minutes to Mr. Garrison.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I return to Dr. Chevrier, and there's a question that I was asked, stretching all the way back when I was on City Council and dealing with the Peers Prostitute Empowerment Society located in my riding, and that is, why don't those involved in sex trade use the social services that are available to everyone else? Why do advocacy groups end up having to provide special services for those involved in sex work?
Thank you for that question. Yes. So there's a lot of reasons for that. If I can go back to my research, but there's also extensive research on access to health and social services for sex workers all over the country. There's a lot of reasons. There are passive barriers as well as active barriers that come in the way. Passive barriers might be things like the geographic location of the place, or the hours that they're open, or the fact that they're only for a specific gender or the other one, which might make it difficult for people to have access to it. It can also be stigma, fear of stigma, and it's not just people being sensitive. Like, there is horrifying experiences of stigma in all health and social services, even very progressive ones. And one thing that is very specific in Winnipeg, but I think exists everywhere from the literature, is that there will be specific service that are for people in the sex trade, but they will only be open to people who have a specific experience in the sex trade. For example, they will implicitly or explicitly tell people that they have to refer to their experience as exploitation or human trafficking in order to receive services. Sometimes that's something that is kind of implied, or they will, counsel people in that way. So that makes it difficult for people to go there. That was a situation in Manitoba at the beginning of my research where there were no services that were offered. Finally, I would say that the context of criminalization also is a huge barrier because it makes people worried that disclosing that they are sex workers, which sometimes is relevant to do, might lead to inappropriate involvement of different agencies or services such as law enforcement, child protection services, which might be inappropriately called on them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chevrier.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Thank you to all the witnesses. I really appreciate the testimony and the time that you've given to this committee. I'll next just give a few seconds just to, I'll just suspend for a few seconds while we get the next set of witnesses on. So thank you. Those that wish to log off may log off. I'll ask the witnesses, starting by Ms. Bapti, to speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll go to Ms. Honju after that, and Ms. Baril after that, and then you'll have some questions. Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Bapti.
I just want to thank the committee for giving me this opportunity. I would like to convey quite a few thoughts, so I'm going to talk a bit fast. Feel free to tell me to slow down. I sit here before you, a survivor of 15 years of prostitution from the ages of 13 to 28. For the first 6 years, I was viewed as a minor in need of support to transition to a healthier life. And at midnight on my 19th birthday, I was now an empowered woman, choosing this, no regard for my history or the fact that I knew nothing else, like so many others involved in this. For the most part, you will not hear me use the term sex worker, as we do not believe it can be a job. Whether you call it sex work, sugar baby, escort, they all end in the same thing: acquiescing to men's sexual demands. Men's role as the root problem to prostitution is often lost in all the other noise that goes along with prostitution. And that is the behavior I want to focus on today, as that was the goal of PSEPA and why we support PSEPA. I encourage you to read the preamble. We find it encouraging and really a blueprint for the way for our country to go. I'm from Vancouver. In the 90s, I lost some of my friends to Canada's worst serial killer. We also dealt with other forms of physical and sexualized violence. Too many in prostitution know intimately. I want to be clear here. It was not the law and it was not stigma that beat, raped, and killed me and my friends. It was men. It was not the location we were in that was unsafe. It was the man we were in that location with that made it unsafe. And it was just not one type of man. It was men from all walks of life. The demand does not want a 40-year-old woman with a degree. It demands a steady stream of young, preferably naive young women. I know human trafficking is not the focus here, but to ignore the connection is to a disservice to the multitudes of women and girls facing that very real threat. We do not traffic young women for nursing or to be an MP. They're trafficked to fulfill men's sexual demands. If we fully decriminalize or legalize prostitution, we will always have beds that will need to be filled. Which young women are we saying will do that? If we choose decriminalization or legalization, essentially we are saying, yes, we will always have a place for you to purchase sex. Do we really want that for Canada, for our girls, for our young women? And all of this begs the question, how does men being able to pay for sex help create an egalitarian society? How does men purchasing sex foster a safer society for all women and girls? How do I know women and girls aren't safe? Because there are parts of my city, every city, that men feel they have the right to ask anyone on the street if they are working. Grandmothers, teenagers, anyone. And if we are even more honest, it's typically the poor and racialized parts of town. I'm going to go over 4 quick points of PSEPA and then wrap it up. So this is what it says. Whereas the Parliament of Canada has grave concerns about the exploitation that is inherent in prostitution and the risks of violence posed to those who engage in it, Canada recognizes the social harm caused by the objectification of the human body and the commodification of sexual activity. It is important to protect human dignity and the equality of all Canadians by discouraging prostitution, which has a disproportionate impact on women and children. Whereas it is important to denounce and prohibit the purchase of sexual services because it creates a demand for prostitution. This is not about hating sex workers or wanting them eradicated. This is about ending a practice that relies on inequality, sexism, racism, colonialism, mental health issues, addictions, and other issues. We are here to discuss the 5-year review of this law, but this law has not been applied across the country in any uniform way. It has not been given an opportunity to create real change or benefit those who need it. There is no way we can have reliable statistics on the effect of this law when there are some parts of the country that still haven't even heard of it. We need more time with this law to watch it grow and to have it fully take hold and to help change society.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thank you. I'll go over to Ms. Hanchu. Am I saying it right, or is it Kahanchu?
Hanchu, thank you.
Hanchu,
thank you, Chair. Thank you for having me today. I'm a lawyer and co-executive director of the HIV Legal Network, an organization which has worked alongside sex workers since our inception almost 3 decades ago to advocate for laws and policies that uphold their human rights. I wanted to talk about a study I co-authored 3 years ago called The Perils of Protection, where we explored sex workers' experiences of law enforcement in Ontario. We spoke to Black, Indigenous, Asian, and other racialized sex workers, migrant sex workers, trans and two-spirit sex workers, and sex workers who worked in conditions of extreme precarity. Some participants worked independently, and others worked with third parties such as managers, drivers, peers, translators, security, bookers, webmasters, and receptionists who provided them with critical support and infrastructure to work safely. Universally, our study participants told us that the enforcement of the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act, or PACEPA, which continues to criminalize sex workers' public communication, has fueled stigma, violence, and exploitation against sex workers, challenging the fallacy that the law protects them. Moreover, the law has not accomplished any of its stated objectives. For example, sex workers continue to work after the passage of the law. Criminalizing sex work has not changed the reality that sex workers still need to access income to support themselves or their families. While they continue working, sex workers describe the negative financial impacts of their encounters with police, who are empowered by the law to surveil them. As one woman described, the police want to put our clients in jail, so it affects us greatly. And then because it affects our financial effect, it affects all other aspects of our life, our basic needs like shelter, food, clothing, and love. Additionally, some sex workers described how criminalization limited prospects of employment outside of the sex industry. One Two-Spirit sex worker who had previous sex work criminal charges described being unable to pursue a career in nursing because vulnerable sector screening revealed those convictions. Participants also shared how criminalization forces sex workers to put up with poor working conditions and incidents of violence. Criminalization has forced third parties and workplaces to conceal sex work, so sex workers can neither access decent working conditions nor report harassment or violence because their employers and peers are consequently scrutinized as third parties or human traffickers. According to one participant, a woman was blackmailed and robbed by many gangsters, so she tried to call the police to stop the violence. The police came and the officer did not investigate the blackmail or the robbery, but gave them a warning that they needed to move out immediately. The police didn't ask what the robber looked like, but rather, who rented the place to you? Who introduced you to work here? Who helped you to do the advertisement? Another participant explained how constant police surveillance has led some women who can no longer work publicly, independently in public space, to work for third parties that they don't know. As you've heard other speakers also describe, the PACEPA has discouraged reporting of violence by sex workers. This is reinforced by multiple research studies. Most sex workers we spoke to indicated that they would never go to the police for help, especially if the abuse happened in the context of their work. Some sex workers, and particularly racialized sex workers, were criminally charged when they contacted law enforcement for assistance. Several participants described how reporting of violence to the police resulted in their workplaces being investigated or shut down, forcing them to move to remote areas without access to their safety networks, and putting them at greater risk of exploitation. Knowing that sex workers and employers are unable to seek police assistance, one participant described how predators frequently target sex workers' workplaces for robbery. All the sex workers shared how the laws and law enforcement presence have led to their isolation, increasing the risk of targeted violence and other abuse. Many described how the prohibition on purchasing sexual services has scared clients who request meeting in more secluded locations, has forced hurried encounters, hampering sex workers' ability to take measures to promote safety, such as screening, communicating about the terms of service, and negotiating conditions to sexual activity with a client. This undermines sex workers' ability to establish consent to the sexual activities in which they engage. As one participant shared, clients don't even want to have the initial conversation on the road, which is a lot more dangerous for girls because you want to have your agreement before you get in the car. Another participant described how the advertising prohibition affected her safety. If I can't do the communicating that I'm used to doing online, then it's going to force me to communicate in that moment when I meet the client. Boundaries are important. If you're not able to communicate ahead of time, it puts you in a rush to go through your boundaries, your prices, and everything. More broadly, criminalization has contributed to sex workers' experience of numerous other harms, including workplace and residential eviction, repercussions on family life and child custody, limitations to sex workers' mobility because their identity as sex workers comes up in database searches by border control agents, detention, deportation for migrant sex workers found to have contravened immigration regulations prohibiting migrant sex work, and impediments to practicing safer sex. The most marginalized sex workers who already face racial and social profiling face the most severe impacts of the PACEPA. These findings are also reflected in an extensive body of research comprising numerous peer-reviewed studies, investigations from human rights organizations, and multiple UN agencies. They consistently confirm that the criminalization of any aspect of sex work undermines the human rights, autonomy, health, and safety of sex workers. We urge this committee to center the experiences of sex workers who've been profoundly harmed by this legislation and recommend a repeal of the sex work offenses. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kahanju. And next to Daphne Baril for 5 minutes.
Thank you, members of the committee, for giving me the chance to testify today. I work as the coordinator of Aztec, a community group in Montreal by and for trans people. Since 1998, Aztec has offered services, accompaniment, legal information, and peer support, particularly to trans women who are homeless, migrants, living with HIV, and/or sex workers. Aztec is the only organization primarily devoted to working with trans sex workers in Quebec, and as far as I know, in all of Canada. Aztec's work with sex workers is funded by the federal government. The sex workers I work with every day are not asking us for help leaving sex work. They want to continue doing sex work for diverse reasons, some in order to attain economic self-sufficiency or to support their families, some to supplement social service payments which aren't enough to make rent, some because they experience transphobic or racist discrimination in legal labor sectors, and some because their immigration status prevents them from working in other jobs. The women who frequent Aztec are asking us rather for help responding to problems caused by the criminalization of their work. They come to us because their landlords are threatening them with eviction after finding out they do sex work from home. They come to us because constant police surveillance in their spaces has left them with criminal charges which could lead to incarceration in a men's prison or which could imperil their immigration status. Many of the women Aztec works with are newcomers to Canada who have come in search of a life safe from anti-trans hatred, discrimination, and violence. Yet PSEPA has denied many of these women the life they were promised by forcing them into unsafe working conditions and by exposing them to the harms of constant police presence. PSEPA has not and will not eliminate sex work in Canada's trans communities. Instead, it has simply made sex work less safe. The majority of the trans people who frequent Aztec experience poverty and live in precarious circumstances, and PSEPA has made their lives even more precarious by pushing them into dangerous, unlivable working conditions. They cannot work together with other members of their community for safety or develop collective measures to screen clients. The threat of police and criminal charges has forced them to work in isolation, far from the city center where there are no community resources. Even for those who are never charged with a criminal offense, the constant threat of criminalization forecloses their possibilities in life and prevents them from creating even basic forms of stability and safety for themselves. Aztec recently conducted research for a qualitative study commissioned by the Department of Justice Canada on a wide range of serious legal problems faced by trans, two-spirit, and non-binary people in Canada. The content of the report has been approved by the Department of Justice, and it's awaiting translation before publication. Our research found, and I'm quoting, "For many participants, the criminalization of sex work obstructed their access to stable income, safer working conditions, trans community supports, and/or gender affirmation. Several participants explicitly identified the current criminal legislative framework related to sex work as a source of unsafe work conditions or of fear, e.g., fear of contact with law enforcement, repercussions on other aspects of their lives, such as their immigration status, housing, and income taxes," end quote. One of the aims of PSEPA was to reduce violence and exploitation in the context of sex work. And in this too, it has utterly failed. Many of the trans sex workers in our study avoided police contact at all costs, including after being assaulted at work, because contact with the police and being known to the police as a sex worker created a cycle of worsening legal problems for them, such as criminal inadmissibility within the immigration system, increased barriers to housing and employment, and escalating criminal charges exacerbated by constant and sometimes violent encounters with the police. Improved police training or access to legal resources would not resolve these women's legal problems because PSEPA itself has caused these problems. It's PSEPA that gives police the power to enter their homes and workplaces. In recent years, the federal government has made numerous efforts to expand basic rights and protections for trans people. But these rights and protections are totally inaccessible to the poor and marginalized trans people I work with, and will be until PSEPA is repealed and sex work is decriminalized in Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now go for our first round of questions over to, I believe it's Mr. Morrison for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the three participants this afternoon, and it's really your expertise that we are really looking forward to move forward with this. My question is going to be to you, Ms. Bapti. I'm actually worked in the Vancouver downtown for a little bit. I have a fairly extensive law enforcement background, and I know you said you started at 13, and we had an Ottawa police officer on Tuesday came forward, and the real concern that she was talking about age of the girls that are now being targeted for sex worker prostitution, that it's almost unbelievable at 11 years old, 10 years old. I just wonder if you can give us some of your experience from at least the downtown Vancouver core and what's happening in British Columbia.
I don't even think it's just the Vancouver downtown core, right? The problem is social media, by and large, right? So now we have ways for predators to access younger and younger people via apps, via different websites. And there are a lot of young girls who are struggling with very big issues, and these predators know that and they prey on them. It's a very intentional thing, right? Like I was working with a 16-year-old who was living in a $2,500 a month townhouse in Kits. Like, how is she paying for that? She like, we all know what is happening there, right? So yes, it's getting younger, and yes, it's getting more scary, which is why we need to be focusing on the problem, which is the demand. If men weren't demanding these younger girls, they would be able to live in peace. And I think we also need to talk about what happens to women and girls when they leave. Like, what is the trauma they're living with after they leave from the violence, from the rapes, from the situations they find themselves in? I was 13, and that was pretty common age back then. I was in a group home. Most of my friends were Indigenous, so racialized, but it's not uncommon, and I think that's what we really need to be getting out. It's not uncommon, and the core of the matter is men demanding it.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I guess just to follow up with your experience, especially in the last 5-6 years, what do you think we could do to moving forward to actually really have an impact, especially on helping our youth before they become so embedded into this criminal life with our organized crime and gang activity and that? How do you feel? What would you say to us if we were to do the following, so many items, so many things that we could actually have a really good impact?
So I think we need to put a lot more into mental health for youth, but I'm actually going to answer that with a 2-second story. I went to Sweden to look at how the law impacted women and communities in Sweden, right? I went to a high school because they had been living with the law for 8 or 9 years, and I wanted to hear how the law affected how they thought of themselves, right? So I'm in a high school, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, all talking about prostitution, all talking about it as self-harm. They would report their friends if they found out they were doing it because it's a harmful practice. It's not good for them, not good for society. And then I was like, okay, that's great. We understand prostitution is a form of harm for all of society. But what about like pornography, right? Like, how do you feel about that? And they looked at me, and as a North Americaner, I couldn't understand it for a minute or two. And they said, we would never date anyone who was involved in any of that. Like, that's because that's not what they want for themselves. And that's the level of self-awareness and self-esteem I want for our girls here. I want our girls to say, I will not put up with this behavior because I am worth more than this.
Maybe just one final question, and that is, we've had a lot of comments on law enforcement and policing, and I just wonder how your relationship is with Vancouver, or I guess Metro Vancouver. Do you work with them? Do you find that the liaison people are cooperative with you in helping out?
We do have interactions with the liaison people through different coalitions I sit on. I mean, Vancouver police are very clear that they're not interested in practicing this law. They have been very clear that this isn't an issue they're going to target. So it's a bit of the wild, wild west out here. But yeah, we do have contact with the liaison officers, and they seem to understand what's happening and the point of PSEPA, perhaps more than other officers.
Yeah. Okay. And I want to thank you for the courage too for coming before this panel and sharing your stories and what's happened. It'll really help us out. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mr. Morrison. Now to go to Madam Diab.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much to the three of you for coming today. As you know, our work is not easy as parliamentarians, but in this panel here, we're specifically looking at one piece of legislation that was enacted and it has now come up for review. So, there's been a lot of talk, and we've only started last week with this, and we've got a number of sessions to hear from different people's views, opinions, organizations, etc. But we hear a lot about women and girls that are in different sectors of our country, some that are Indigenous, Black, racialized. Young, 13-year-olds, minors. We talk about sex work. We talk about exploitation. We talk about trafficking. I recognize these are all different scenarios. And we have laws for some of these things. I hope we do. Whether they're applied uniformly or not across the country, is a question for another day. Today, though, we're looking at this specific act that deals with the issue that we're dealing with. So, Sandra, if you don't mind if I call you Sandra, can you, from your perspective, please talk to me about this specific piece of legislation that we're looking at, and what would you do to make it better?
Yes, thank you for the question. I wanted to quote the Supreme Court of Canada in Bedford. It's a case we intervened in almost 10 years ago. And what the Supreme Court said at the time was, a law that prevents sex workers from taking basic safety precautions is a law that has lost sight of its purpose. And I think that is what we have here at the PSEPA. The law has, you heard about the research I've conducted, you've heard from other researchers, there's extensive evidence since the passage of PSEPA that shows the law absolutely prevents sex workers from taking very basic safety precautions, and that has affected their safety. It's fueled exploitation. When you conflate sex work with human trafficking, it means it's all meaningless. What is exploitation when everything is conflated? I often hear also from sex workers that they are often the people who can identify situations of abuse, exploitation within their industry. But when they or their clients or their peers and managers are all criminalized, they will not go to the police. And you heard the reporting statistics. It's horrendous how few sex workers, especially Indigenous and racialized sex workers and migrant sex workers, will not go to the police in any circumstance, even in the most violent situations they might experience because people are preying on that the impunity. They won't go to the police. So I think the only answer is to fully repeal the Protection of Communities and Exploited Persons Act.
Daphne, if I may call you Daphne, you serve a unique clientele. And when you talked about newcomers, my heart really goes out to those newcomers. And to all, but particularly those, you're right, they've come to Canada for a better life. Can you please, from your experience and the work that you are involved in your organization, which you say is probably the only one in Canada, Can you please shed a little bit more light in terms of, is this a Montreal, Quebec only phenomenon? Is this across the country? And I'd like to get a little bit more feedback from you, please. And what can we do with this act?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for the question. It's certainly not just a problem in Montreal. I mean, I can speak personally, at the very least, for all of Quebec. We end up working with people and with newcomers to Canada who are all over Quebec. And as I mentioned during my initial remarks, actually in recent years, it's become less and less of an exclusively urban phenomenon because so many trans sex workers fear constant surveillance by police, and it has driven many of the people that I work with at Aztec into suburban or exurban circumstances where there are fewer community supports. And when I say that fewer community supports, I mean trans community supports, and I also mean community supports for migrants and people from their cultural communities. And that kind of isolation has really contributed to violence into danger that they experience at work. It's made it very difficult for newcomers to Canada to realize the dreams that they had when they came to Canada to, live safely and as who they are, in accordance with the gender identity that they have. And, for many of them, it's quite, it's quite a shock because they have been told, they've been promised as asylum seekers, as refugees, what have you, that Canada is a place where trans people can live without constant fear of violence. And then they come to Canada and they experience extremely unsafe working conditions. They have no recourse to any kind of legal solution to any violence they might experience at work. They have constant police surveillance, and the police are profiling them for being trans, profiling them for being migrants, and who are constantly threatening criminal charges that could undo their immigration status and send them back to where they, the countries that they had to flee.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much. I'll next go to Madame Michaud. From the block for 6 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. We really appreciate you. Thank you for your evidence. I have a question for Mrs. Ka Hon-Chu. I hope I've pronounced it properly. You spoke a bit about the Bedford decision and the context in which the law was implemented. And so there are decisions that court decisions that said that this made the law unconstitutional in certain ways, and it puts sex workers in a difficult situation. And it hasn't changed much because women continue to work. It hasn't changed their own reality. In the worst case, it affected them negatively in their carrying out of their work. So what should we do? What can we do with this law that we're reviewing today? Do we erase everything? Do we start from scratch? Are there some provisions that are better than others that should stay? Should we decriminalize sex work completely? What would be the solutions, in your opinion? Because this debate is quite divisive. I'd like to know what you have to say about this.
As you know, in the Supreme Court of Canada decision, they struck down 3 provisions, living on the avails of prostitution, common body house, and communication. And so the PASEPA actually reinscribes those very same provisions, adds a prohibition on purchasing and a prohibition on advertising. So nothing has changed. The harms that the Supreme Court of Canada found almost a decade ago are still happening, as you heard from the research. And so I think this means that this current law is still unconstitutional. It will not withstand charter scrutiny. The same harms are occurring, and there's reams of research to prove that. And even though there's a new legislative objective that says it's claiming to eliminate, discourage sex work, to promote reporting, you heard during my presentation that it's not meeting any of those legislative objectives. It's not even rationally connected to this idea of feminism and gender equality when you realize that you're putting sex workers in harm's way, and also denying their personhood by stigmatizing them. You know, Daphne mentioned a senator who said they wanted to make, or Dr. Chevrier in the last presentation talked about wanting to make it so dangerous that sex workers would just leave the industry. That is not a feminist model, and that cannot withstand constitutional scrutiny. So I would say there needs to be a wholesale repeal of PASEPA. There's nothing about it that is, it's irredeemable, the law.
Merci beaucoup. Ben, j'aimerais peut-être entendre.
Thank you very much. So I would like to hear Ms. Baril also answer the question, what should we do with this law? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. I agree completely with what Sandra just spoke to. I think that until this law is repealed completely, the people that I work with at Aztec will not be safe. They'll not be able to work safely. And that does mean the decriminalization of sex work, because it's the threat of criminalization that they live with every day that drives them into unsafe working conditions. And then it's also the actual legal problems that result from the constant presence of police in their lives that will persist until, they'll persist as long as PASEPA exists. And when PASEPA is overturned, then we'll be able to see potentially a safer working conditions for sex workers in Quebec.
Madame Michaud. Oui, excusez. Les hommes.
So I understand that there are not really any legislative changes possible to bring us to a better situation. But do you think there'd be other solutions possible to be able to help women to ensure that they can be safer in when they're working? Are there organizations that provide help to these people in the working in this field? What kind of solution would you suggest to improve their safety? I'd like to ask Madame Baril again this question.
Well, I mean, I think that those resources already do exist, and they're community supports and community organizations. Certainly in the Canada's trans communities, it's the trans sex workers have come to community organizations like Aztec because they trust that we understand the realities that they experience at work. And they rely on organizations like ours to help them resolve the problems that they come to us with. And if they come to us and they say that, you know, they're experiencing unsafe conditions at work, then, you know, like we refer them to the resources that they need, or we help offer legal information that might help them resolve those situations on their own terms. And I think that, you know, the real solution to issues of unsafe conditions in sex work is sex worker community supports. And I think that's one of the most harmful parts of PASEPA, is that it prevents sex workers from working together, from sharing information about how to work safely, and from creating safety measures for each other, from looking out for each other. And certainly in the trans community, that has historically been so important, for maintaining trans sex workers' safety is the ability to work together. And PSEPA expressly prohibits that.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going to have to go to the next questioner, Mr. Garrison, for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to thank all three of the witnesses for being with us today, and in particular, Ms. Baptiste for sharing her personal stories with the committee. I know that that's never an easy thing to do. I want to start with Ms. Kahanchu. I think she raised a very important question about the constitutionality of this law. And to me, that relates to the point that people tend to say that the sale of sex is not criminalized in Canada. And Ms. Hanchu was giving some examples where that's simply not true. And I wonder if she'd like to expand on that.
Absolutely. So we know Section 213, 1.1 is a new provision that was introduced under PSEPA that criminalizes public communication in places near children's, schoolyards, daycares, parks. There's also the Section 213 that was not struck down under the Bedford decision, which is impeding traffic for the purpose of prostitution. And obviously sex workers are living in a sphere of criminality when their peers, their managers, their workplaces are criminalized, and that has impacts on their ability to report. But sex workers also, in many cases, are third parties themselves. Some of them, Daphne talked about working in collectives, working with other people who provide mutual support and services to one another, and they are caught under that net of criminality. In the research I did, we talked to sex workers who've been charged under third-party offenses, the material benefit or the advertising or the procuring ones, because they were providing that service to another sex worker. So they're absolutely still criminalized under the new laws.
And I know the work your organization has done in the fight against HIV, and I just like to give you a chance to make the connection here, which I think a lot of people haven't made, as to how this bill actually has a negative impact on the fight against HIV.
Thank you, Randall, for that question. So when you criminalize communication, the purchase of sex, people aren't able to negotiate the terms of the transaction in a clear and concise way, what they're willing to do, safer sex measures. And so that impedes that communication and the ability to negotiate, including safer sex measures. We also hear from sex workers in managed workplaces that condoms and other safer sex devices they don't keep them on site, because finding them is evidence that you're doing sex work. It's criminal. So a lot of condoms and other safer sex practices are not necessarily promoted because there's that level of secrecy and concealment. I also wanted to share a statistic with you. There was research that was done a couple of years ago that looked at regimes where they criminalized versus decriminalized sex work. And what this research found was that decriminalizing sex work in those jurisdictions reduced new HIV transmissions by 33 to 46% in the next 10 years. That is a huge amount. And so it all circles back to the ability to negotiate, communicate, and have an open workplace where workplace health and safety is promoted. And maybe just one more point, if I can, Randall. The other thing I wanted to say was, when you decriminalize, you also give sex workers access to occupational health and safety standards, employment legislation, all the things that other decriminalized sectors experience, and those promote health and safety in the workplace.
And I'd like to give Ms. Baril a chance to respond to that same question about the impact for trans sex workers and HIV of this law.
It's a great question. Thank you so much, Randall. As I'm sure that you all know, HIV is also has criminal laws surrounding the transmission of HIV currently in Canada. Now, this, in combination with the criminalization of sex work, creates numerous complications for people who are surveyed by police because they are known to police as sex workers or suspected to be sex workers. In the study that I mentioned, commissioned by the Department of Justice, there was one story that I'd like to tell about that subject, where one of the participants in the study was assaulted, and in the context of her life as a sex worker, and she reported the assault to the police. And in the process of reporting, She disclosed her HIV status to the police. The police then disclosed her HIV status to her assailant, and she ended up with criminal charges for the transmission of HIV when she was reporting her own sexual assault to the police. Now, this is exactly the kind of issue that prevents sex workers from accessing any form of safety from the police. It stems from the way that sex workers are treated by the police whenever they come into contact with them. And it leads to a climate of fear. It leads to a climate where sex workers are, less likely to even get tested for HIV because they fear that if they are exposed as HIV positive, if they have evidence that they're HIV positive, that it will be used against them by police in the future. And all of that becomes extremely complicated in a context where sex workers are constantly being surveyed by the police, and it discourages them from getting the health supports that they need. It prevents them from accessing safer sex materials as well.
I know I'm out of time, so let me just thank you for the important work that you and your organization do in the community, and I'm very pleased to learn of the existence of your organization and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Next to Mr. Lawrence for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you to all the witnesses. I guess I would just start out with this comment, in that if there is that everyone should be feel valued, loved, and safe, and if there's anyone, in particularly in my riding, but anywhere across Canada, that feels they can't go to the police and they're in an unsafe position, I'd personally take that call and do everything I could to help that individual. So if anyone in my riding particularly is feeling unsafe and they feel like they can't go to the police, please pick up the phone, and I'm more than happy to help them. That being said, I'd like to direct my question to Ms. Babti. First of all, thank you very much for your testimony, and thank you for sharing your story. It is greatly appreciated, and I know the strength it must take to share your story and to give this testimony. You mentioned in your testimony that you would like to see this legislation, I'll paraphrase, take root or to be fully implemented. Are there, how do you think we could do that? How do you think the police could help with that? How could government officials help this legislation be more effective?
I'm going to talk again about the time I had in Sweden, because they had enacted the law. And so what they did, which is perfectly doable here, is to educate police, crown attorneys about not only what the law is, but the intent of the law. And the intent of the law is to create a safer Canada, and to eradicate prostitution, because we don't see it as a fair and equal trait, right? Like, we don't see it as something we want continuing in our society. So we need to educate everyone from beat cops right up to the crown attorneys. And we can do that in, a number of ways. We have city cops, we have RCMP. We can, it can be as simple as sending out a directive that those, officers can then talk about, or it can be a traveling panel that goes to all the different districts that does the education. I think, Canada's a pretty big country compared to Sweden, so we might have to get a little creative with that. But I don't think it's impossible. And, in our world now, everything is done on Zoom, right? Like, there's no reason we couldn't have Zoom calls with multiple police officers, informing them, educating them, and then them going on and talking to their colleagues and the ones that they're in charge in. And the other thing they did, not only did they do police education, they also did social education. So they, on billboards, on the side of buses, everywhere, they explained why they had passed these laws and what the intents of these laws were. So it was a social as well as a political campaign that came together to help foster this change in the country.
Thank you for that. And there's probably some varied disagreement on this panel between what percentage of this, but I think all would admit that at least some women are being manipulated or forced into this type of work. For those percentage, whatever that might be, we don't need to have that debate. Are there other ways we could amend this legislation to stop and call a spade? It's going to be men, mostly from men manipulating in other ways, coercing individuals against their will into this type of work. Ms. Baptiste.
Oh, sorry,
yeah, sorry,
okay,
yeah.
Sorry. So you're asking how do we stop women from being coerced into this?
Yeah, are there amendments we could make to the legislation here?
I think the amendments to the legislation is, get rid of 213. They don't need to face charges for the situations they find themselves in. We've already said that in the preamble. I think, and I don't understand the thinking that women aren't going to police if they've been harmed. I know women who have gone to police. I think police may need, police still don't really deal with issues that women live with by and large very well still, right? Domestic violence, rape, sexual assault. We still need to be educating the police on these. And I think we just need to roll in PSEPA and all of that.
Thank
this
you.
is not about punishing women. This is about
Thank you, Ms.
changing men's behavior.
Baptiste. Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. I'll next go over to Ms. Briard for 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for your personal testimony. It can be more difficult to do that, but it's highly appreciated. The objective of the committee is to protect the sex trade workers and to improve their situation. So, Ms. Baptiste, last January in Winnipeg, there was an end of giving permits to escort agencies and similar. There were people who wanted those permits to be revoked. They thought that these changes were necessary to end sexual exploitation, sexual violence. But workers in the industry were against this measure because they feared negative consequences, including that they be pushed to working in a clandestine manner or would be more fearful for their safety. I would like to hear what you have to say about what happened in Winnipeg.
Talking about this is work, as this is inevitable. We're working towards the end of it, just like we're working towards the end of domestic violence and the end of rape and the end of all these things that plague women in society. And I want to work towards the end of prostitution. So hear me out. When they pulled the licenses, what should have been implemented is what women need in order to not be in those situations, right? A lot of the women I work with, others work with, are in it because of economic inequalities. Welfare isn't enough. They're not getting enough child support. They're not getting, whatever they need. So we need to look at what women need to be brought up to a level that they don't need to rely on that for their economic viability, right? My sister and brother own an auto mechanic shop my sister and brother-in-law, and 3 doors over from them is a licensed brothel, massage parlor. And it's disconcerting to, we hear what happens through the walls. We see men going in and out all the time. And that's just not good for society. But once you put it in an office space, once you put prostitution behind doors, how do we know who is behind those doors, what is happening behind those doors, and who put those doors there in the first place? How do we know they're safe? How do we know they're not trafficked? How do we know they're overage? As soon as we, kind of lose the ability to monitor what's happening, kind of turns into the wild, wild west. And will just keep increasing and spreading when, for equality's sake, we should be working to end it.
Merci.
Thank you, Madame Baptiste, for this answer. You're talking about the Wild West. Now I have a question for Daphne. During the pandemic, we observed a great increase in violence. A street worker in Lévis, Quebec, described the situation of women in the sex trade as a yoke. With COVID, with lockdown, with curfews, women changed their way of working, but regardless of the methods chosen, most of them had to turn towards independent work, autonomous work, or virtual work. With individual or independent work, would you consider that they're more isolated and risk experiencing even more violence?
It's really important, and certainly in the Quebec context, many of the COVID-19 measures, which seriously affected sex workers' capacity to do their work in a safe manner. Ultimately, those sex workers had no recourse for any kind of income support during that period. They had no recourse for any kind of, in fact, even continuing to do their work was dangerous, because the only work that they could get they would have risks of either their clients or themselves being in contact with police who were policing COVID-19 measures. Now, if sex workers had the same...
Ms. Merritt, we're just slightly out of time. I'm going to ask a quick consent of the committee if we can go for another 5 minutes. That'll be about 4 minutes over, so I can get Madame Michaud and Mr. Garrison another 2.5 minutes each. Do I have the consent? Any objections? Okay. So, Madame Michaud for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the consent, dear colleagues. So we appreciate having more time to ask questions of our witnesses. And I would like to address this question to you, Madame Baptiste. There are several factors that explain an increase of sexual work. So the application of law and the fact that they're not necessarily enforced and they're not necessarily good. And there's a lack of preventive education. You're speaking about putting an end to all this. So I'd like to know, in your opinion, what we could do as parliamentarians to prevent sexual exploitation, which has increased greatly recently.
We need to tighten up our laws when it comes to sexual assault and rape. We need to stop putting the onus to be on the victim. We need to give victims more confidentiality and things like that. But I think one of the most important things we need to do is we need to be having the conversation with the men in our lives about how they treat women, Do they buy sex? Why do they think that's okay? Like, I have 3 sons. We have had this conversation. Like, it's a part of our discussion at home, right? And we need to be having it with more and more men, because I think we're able to hide our behaviors more and more behind screens and in isolated ways like that. And we need to be bringing this out in more conversation. We had the Me Too movement, we've had, Weinstein. And so Bill Cosby, it's entering the conversation, but it needs to enter in a more meaningful way from the top down. And we need to have the space for women to have those conversations amongst ourselves as well.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais laisser mon temps.
Thank you very much. I'll leave my time. I don't have much left. Thank you for this testimony.
Show Mr. Garrison for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to my colleagues for this brief extension. Both Ms. Kahan-Chu and Ms. Baril mentioned the impact of these laws on migrant sex workers, and I would just ask that they make sure that they include in their written comments, since we don't have time to deal with that today, that issue, because I think it's very important. But I'd like to close with a question to Madam Kahan-Chu on the trafficking question. So can you comment on the I guess equivalence or line that's being drawn between these provisions of the existing law, which harm sex workers, and the presumption that they actually do something about trafficking?
Yes, and I thank you for that question. I think what I shared before is that when you characterize everything as abusive, if you characterize all sex work as a form of exploitation, there's no distinction to be made between sex work and abuse or abusive labor practices or trafficking. And the legal definition of trafficking requires a fear for one's safety. And so there's clearly some precision that has to be made to distinguish these two. I think as long as you criminalize sex work, you're going to have a much harder time identifying people who are suffering or experiencing exploitation or facing human trafficking. So I think there's this conflation does not help sex workers and doesn't help people who experience human trafficking.
Thank you very much for that answer. And thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I know we're over time, so I'll close there.
I want to thank the members for extending the time. I also want to thank all the witnesses, particularly this is a very sensitive nature, and forgive me if I had to cut you off. It's just I have to keep the time flowing and enabling every member to be able to ask questions. So thank you, and I'm going to ask for adjournment, and see you next week to the members, and thank you very much, and have a good weekend.
Thank you very much.
Meeting.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Weekend.